Welcome to Shattered Reality with your hosts Kate Valentine and Fahrusha. Prepare to have your paradigms shifted and your truths questioned. And now, Shattered Reality.
Well, hello. This is Fahrusha, and today is December 18th, 2018. And we have a really wonderful show today. It is our show number 80, I believe. So we've been doing this for, is it 3 years or 4 years now? I'm not even sure. I think it might be 4 years. In any case, we endeavor to do like about 2 shows a month. We're not in a rush. We have no corporate sponsors, so we don't have to worry about grinding them out every week. And we can be reasonably selective about our guests. And we have a wonderful, wonderful guest today who is the author of a number of books. One is just coming out now. She's going to talk about those books. Today's book is called American Cosmic, and I am really pleased to introduce Diana Walsh Pasulka to Shattered Reality Podcast. Hi, Diana. May I call you Diana?
Please do, Fahrusha, and thank you for inviting me.
Oh, it is absolutely my pleasure. And having read recently this American Cosmic, your new book, I have to give you an unusual piece of praise, and that is reading your book brought up so many questions in my mind that I am going to go through the bibliography at the end and hopefully dig up a few of those books that I haven't read so I can find out more stuff. And
that's great.
And not everybody's book is like that, that you want to do that.
I take that as an excellent compliment. Thank you.
Well, it is meant to be a compliment. So, Diana, right now you are a professor of religious studies. Can you give us a little bit about your academic background?
Yes, absolutely. So I knew I wanted to study religion from 11 years old. And so I read everything I could about all of the world's religions as well as philosophy. Strangely, when I got into, I lived in California almost all my life. And I went to the University of California at Davis for my undergraduate. And I took religion there, but I also was a pre-med major because, parents aren't, they're not too fond of the major religious studies. They say, what are you going to do with that? So I did science, and then I did philosophy and religion as well. So when I graduated, I decided to apply to what's called the Graduate Theological Union, which is the Divinity School of UC Berkeley. And I was funded by the Jesuits there. I am Catholic, and so I went to school with people who were in formation to be Jesuit priests, and I took courses concurrently at UC Berkeley. As well, I did take a class at Stanford as well with René Girard, who I don't know if your listeners would know who he is, but he's fascinating. He has a book about the scapegoat theory, and fascinating person. So, and then after that, I went all the way across the country to do a PhD in religious studies in a department that focused on philosophy and religion, and that was at Syracuse University, and that's where I got my PhD. And I'm currently the chair of philosophy and religion at the University of North Carolina, right on the coast here in Wilmington, and it's a beautiful place, beautiful coastal town. Wow. And I focus on the Catholic tradition, but I also I have a few. Everybody in my field has a specialty, but they also have subspecialties. So because I grew up in California in the around the dot-com boom in the 1990s, that's when I was in graduate school, I learned a lot about technology, and I was always fascinated with it. So as I went to graduate school, I also learned a lot about technology and read a lot of philosophy of technology, Marshall McLuhan, Heidegger. There's a professor here, Catherine Halis at Duke University, Donna Haraway. So I always kept up with the latest research basically on technology, and that figures into my research as well. So I do Catholic history and the intersections of technology and religion, which really leads into looking at the brain and how we perceive things.
Yes, yes, indeed. And although generally speaking, I'm sure you know this because this is a paranormal sort of edge science, parapsychology, consciousness type blog. I'm sorry. I do a blog too. No, a podcast, because this is the type of podcast. We generally do not promote a particular religion one over the other, and I'm sure you understand that. But just it comes to me that you had mentioned in your book that you changed religions fairly early on in your life, which I found to be an interesting part of your backstory.
Oh, sure. So I guess when you learn a lot about religions, what happens is that your religious belief becomes complicated. And my mother is a non-practicing Jewish person, and my father grew up Catholic. We had Irish Catholic priests in the house a lot and that type of thing. So I was always around religion. And I was also in California. There's a lot of secular New Age beliefs, so I was around that too. And I attended a Catholic girls' high school. And then, of course, I chose to study religion. So when you study religion, you learn that religion for you becomes something that's not something you just do on a Sunday, right? It becomes your whole life, basically. And it's not that I guess what happened to me was I became agnostic in a way, in the sense that I don't think, even though I have a cultural tradition, and I do follow my cultural tradition, I don't believe it to be exclusive. I don't know what God is. I believe in love and, the tenets of some of the major world religions.
Sure.
So I guess that's what, the question comes up a lot. I teach at a university that's a state university. I never advocate any religion. It's not what we do. In religious studies, actually, we don't promote religions, we study religions. So yes. People, when you sit on an airplane, people ask you what you do. I never tell them what I do because, they'll say, oh, you're a minister. Well, no, I'm not a minister. If I get close to saying what I do, I say I study the history of religions. And I think that's probably more accurate.
Yes. And it is very interesting. I had dinner recently with several people in the field of parapsychology, consciousness studies, that sort of thing. And at least two of these people I think you may have heard of. I will not mention their names, but everybody at the table, which comprised about 6 people, except for me, said at one point in their life they had been an atheist. And I said, well, I'm not a card-carrying member of any particular church, but I was never an atheist. It never occurred to me to be an atheist. And they were all shocked at that because they had all gone through their quote-unquote atheist phase.
That's really funny. Actually, it's a coincidence or synchronicity, however you want to look at it. But last night I was talking to one of my children, and she's 10. And she said, and her sister's 15. And she said, is Claire an atheist? And I said, well, Claire may be an atheist. A lot of people go through a phase like that. And she said, Mama, were you ever an atheist? And I said, you know what? I was a lot of things, but I think I was not an atheist. And so she said, I'll never be an atheist too. And I thought that was funny, but it's funny that we're talking about it now.
Yes,
so,
it is a synchronicity, in fact.
Yes, it is.
It just seems to me, my take on the situation is so much about consciousness and consciousness being much bigger than the brain. And because that's always been my experience, always have had paranormal experiences, I am unable to be an atheist because of that. Now, like you, I don't claim to know what the universe is, what the consciousness of the universe is all about. I think it's probably beyond me. But seek after some of these numinous experiences in order to have a better concept of what might be going on. But I am afraid that the reducing valve of our brain may keep us from really knowing what's going on.
I think that's true. I think that we're blessed with those experiences,
Yes.
and when they happen, they're a blessing.
So your prior, you were involved with the Robbie Graham book. You helped him put that together, and you are a co-author of that book. Would you want to mention a couple of your books that are out there now?
Oh, sure. So so Robbie Graham wrote. He has two books, right? He's got the anthology of, and I did the introduction for that. I was actually supposed to write a chapter for that book, and instead, I was also writing American Cosmic at the time, and his book is called Reframing the Debate.
Right.
And he also has a prior book that is an awesome book, by the way. I very much recommend this book. It's called Silver Screen Saucers, and he's a very, very talented researcher, and gets pretty theoretical about the phenomena. And so Reframing the Debate is his book in which many people contribute chapters, and I wrote the introduction to that. So it was his endeavor, by the way. I was not a part of his endeavor. I just contributed the introduction.
Okay.
And I've worked with Robbie. Robbie and I attended a conference. My current book in the preface, I hope they didn't take that out. I don't actually have the hard copy of that book of American Cosmic yet, but I do have the proofs.
Yes,
and
which is what I read. Yes,
my edited preface. My preface was edited a lot, and so I start by talking about Jacques Vallée taking Robbie and I on a tour of Silicon Valley, and I hope they didn't edit Robbie out of there, but he was there with us.
Okay. Yeah. Since I did read the proof copy, that's what I read as well. Now, you were also involved with a seminal work on the concept in the Catholic religion of purgatory, which got you into the Vatican Library, correct?
Yes, that's absolutely true. Yes. So I wrote basically a history of the Catholic doctrine of purgatory, which is a doctrine of basically the soul post-death. So what happens to the soul if the soul is not perfect enough to go to heaven, but not going to hell? And so purgatory is kind of like a way station that Catholics are obligated to believe in, actually. And purgatory for many, many, many years, many years, 1500, was something that people did devotions to. Catholics all over, European Catholics everywhere did devotions to purgatory. If you go through Europe, you'll see part of the churches devoted to places where people would pray for souls in purgatory. And that doctrine is not, it's still around, the doctrine's around, but the devotion is completely gone. And so I wanted to know why. And so I did a study that lasted a very long time, about 10 years, maybe 12. And that came out of my dissertation. And I went to archives, and I used a lot of different languages to look at the kinds of things that Catholics were talking about from about 1200 to about 1800. And I came up with some really interesting anecdotes. And in fact, this is what got me into my current research into the phenomena, which is also known as the UFO phenomena. And most people wouldn't understand how does a person who studied Catholic culture get into UFOs? And, it does sound odd, but what happened was that I was studying the Catholic culture from, the records in archives all over the world, basically. Well, all over the Western world. And what I came across was I found that people were recording things like discs in the sky, flames of light that would come into their rooms or cells and things like that, conscious balls of light. And so I wrote these down. Now, I hadn't thought about UFOs whatsoever. I had the lens or the frame of the Catholic culture, and I was looking at this and I was seeing how people interpreted these things. And I had so many of these at the end of my research, and I kept a log of them, and I didn't know what to think about them. I only included one or two in the book on purgatory. And I showed it to a friend of mine, and my friend looked at it and said, "Wow, this looks like Steven Spielberg movie." And I thought, "What?" And I thought he was crazy. But indeed, about a week later, there was a UFO conference in my town, and I attended it. And there I met people who were experiencers, people who experienced
Sure.
this phenomena. And they were describing the same things. And that's when I made the connection. I mean, a lot of people would say, well, hello, of course. But honestly, I hadn't made that connection before. And so I was intrigued. And that started in about 2012.
Okay. So let's move back just a little bit to tell you that myself and the absent Kate Valentine and our wonderful engineer here, Bill, we are all experiencers. So, we're totally on board with wanting to know more about the origins of these experiences. And
Sure.
and that's part of the reason why we do this show, because we wanted to have intelligent discussion about experiences of the paranormal sort. Now, one of the interesting things that occurred with my reading of your book was that I was on an airplane and I was reading your book, and I kept seeing out of the corner of my right eye a woman standing just off the aisle of the airplane. Like she would be sort of standing if there were a seat in this particular place where there wasn't actually a seat. It was towards the back of the airplane, and the side aisle, the side facing the window, had gone down from 2 seats per row to 1 seat there. So she was standing where the second seat would have been if there had been a second seat. And I just kept seeing her out of the corner of my eye. I'd look up and there'd be no one there. I'd look up and there was no one there. And I mentioned this to you and told you that I thought it was possibly our mutual friend, Brenda Denzler.
Right.
Which, Brenda is somebody that I know through the internet and through the Monroe Institute, and having probably, I think, done a blog post about her many years ago in her book. But then you had mentioned her, and I thought, wow, that might be Brenda Denzler. But you came out and said you thought it was St. Mary of Agreda?
Yeah.
Am I pronouncing that right?
Yeah. If you're reading my book, the saint that haunts my book is well, she's actually not she's not a saint. She's not technically a saint, but she is there's a case for her canonization.
Okay.
I don't think it's going to happen, but she's a nun, and she bilocated to New Mexico in 1600s.
Yes.
And she's fascinating. And she kind of haunts my book, really, because I go back to her and talk about her. And especially in the last chapter, I talk about her. So if you were coming back from the Vatican, is this correct?
Right. And
yes, you're coming back from the Vatican, and this is happening to you.
And I just also, on my way there, when I was going there, I picked up another book, like a pulp fiction book, to read, and I didn't realize it was all about the Vatican. And
wow.
I just picked it off. Do you have a shelf of books in your house that you picked up through your life, and they're like fiction books you haven't read, but they don't look too bad, like maybe you want to keep them on
sure.
the shelf? And so I just went, eeny, meeny, miny, mo, and I grabbed one, and it turned out to be about the Vatican and all kinds of intrigue at the Vatican involving Israeli spies and stuff like that, and people posing as other people. And I thought, what's the chances of this? So I hadn't gotten anywhere near the last chapter of your book when this had happened. I was still in, I think, your book is kind of in sort of 3 sections. And I was still in the end of the first section and the beginning of the second section type of thing. But I have to say to you that the first section of the book very much resonated with me as an experiencer. The whole idea that what is known as sleep paralysis for some people may have a greater significance is something that I personally have written about fairly extensively on my blog, because I think that sleep paralysis is a biological function that causes people to and higher mammals to keep from doing strange things while they're sleeping, like sleepwalking or trying to fly out their window and stuff like that. But I think that, it's possible that others, whoever those others might be, whether we would call them aliens, interdimensionals, saints, angels, whatever we want to call them, I think that it's the perfect way to approach angry apes with guns, because if they're paralyzed, they can't do anything, and whoever these beings are can interact with us when we are in a liminal state, that is hypnopompic or hypnagogic, right?
Right, that's exactly right. Yeah. James had, in the second chapter of my book, talks about his sleep paralysis. Yes.
And I think that other scientists over the course of time have said that their theories have come to them sort of full-blown into their heads through such a method. It just came to them in a dream or in this hypnagogic state.
Yes, indeed. The two scientists I interview in chapter 1 and chapter 2 are people who have a very interesting creativity, basically a process of creativity that does include exactly what you're talking about, things that they don't associate with their own minds.
So would you like to tell us a little bit about your adventures with these two fellows?
Sure. So they're anonymous in my book, and I do that to protect their identities because of what I call the John Mack effect.
Yes.
So John Mack, of course, is the Pulitzer Prize-winning Harvard researcher who's passed away. However, he did in the 80s and 90s study people who were like you, experiencers, and found that they were perfectly normal people. And this raised a lot of red flags for Harvard University, where he was employed, and he was tenured. And so they did an investigation, and it was, he could have lost his tenure for doing this study, but everything he had done was above board. It was research. So people who I talked to, I wanted to keep their identities carefully concealed because of that John Mack effect. These are people that have amazing careers like Mack. And, so I had an obligation to do that.
Sure.
The first person is an incredible person who doesn't even seem like a real human being, but is. And it took me a few years to understand how incredible this person is, and dedicate my book to him. And so his name is Tyler, and I use the name Tyler in reference to this movie called Fight Club because John Hynek or Alan Hynek and Jacques Vallée called this, the invisible college. They said that there was this contemporary invisible college of scientists who study this phenomena. But I have to rename it the Fight Club, because the first rule of Fight Club is that you can't talk about it. You can't talk about Fight Club. And what I found was that there were these people who actively studied the phenomena. However, they would not talk. They would not talk about it. They could not talk about it. And so the first one, Tyler, invited me out to go to New Mexico to a crash site, a UFO crash site. I guess there were about 7 that happened in 7 crashes in the 1940s and all throughout New Mexico. And so this was one in which I would have to wear a blindfold to go to. And so I agreed to go, but I said I must take my friend who also studies the phenomenon and is a researcher, scientist. And at first Tyler said no, but then I said, this is who it is. And he researched this person and said that, okay. So the reason I think he said that was because of all the people in the world, if you had an artifact from a real crashed craft, this scientist, would be able to figure it out, or at least figure that it was it was a conundrum. So we went. So we flew to New Mexico. James, the scientist, and I were blindfolded, and Tyler drove us out to the site, the crash site, and we got out there, and we spent the whole day looking for parts. Tyler had been out there multiple times. We had special metal detectors that were configured to the types of things we were looking for. I'd never used one before. We found parts, and then subsequently these have been looked at and studied. And Tyler is an interesting. I would call if your audience is familiar with General Corso.
Sure.
Okay, yeah. So this person has to be the newest version of a Corso figure, because this Tyler does biotechnology, and so it appears that what Tyler does is interacts with these artifacts and gets inspired to create biotechnologies. Then that biotechnologies that you and I are actually very familiar with and would benefit from them. So in a sense is creating, in my mind, basically kind of like an intervention into the human body. This is what we're having here from these artifacts. Now, whether or not it's objectively the case, I don't know. I'm just describing what I saw for years and what the process involved.
Well, I'm going to just interject here a little bit about Colonel Corso, who I never met, and I don't know anything.
Did I call him a general? That's a mistake.
Colonel Corso.
He's a colonel. That's
Colonel
right.
Corso.
Colonel. Yep.
Did I say general?
No, I think I did. I think
okay.
I said it.
Doesn't matter. But there is just a little problem with the Corso information from my point of view, and it's not about Corso. It has to do with Bill Burns and the fact that Bill Burns put out his book and he edited it without Corso's permission at the very end, or just put in stuff and took out stuff to make it a better bestseller. Now, that is now we're getting into the second part of your book, which I don't want to go into quite yet, but how perceptions can be changed by altering facts and presenting them as quasi truths.
True. Yes,
and
exactly.
So that's the first part. Just that I just want to put a caveat on Corso. Corso himself, I have nothing against, and I absolutely have nothing against Bill Burns. I just want to keep the record clear that this is what, to my knowledge, Bill Burns did. He edited the book. He changed some of the stuff. He took stuff out. He put stuff in. And now we will never know, because poor Mr. Corso, poor Colonel Corso, has passed on. And so whatever is the actual bottom line there, we don't actually know. That being said, the other thing about these artifacts, undoubtedly, and this is not me either, but undoubtedly you will have people who say to you that this was a psyop. I'm not saying that. I have no idea. However, the people who have studied other pieces of wreckage of purported alien craft have found metals that could not have been created on Earth, that have isotopes of maybe magnesium mixed with metals in a way that we don't have here on Earth. And from reading your book, I believe you are indicating something similar.
Yes. I mean, throughout the book, I do suggest that I have no idea if we're involved, if, James and I are involved in a psyop or not. So, and the question doesn't actually matter to me, right, because I'm not necessarily trying to find the truth of the matter. And in fact, the truth of the matter that's my point, is that it doesn't actually matter if it's true or not, because there will be belief around it regardless of whether it's true or not.
Exactly.
And that's basically the very larger narrative of my book, is basically saying that, there's a myth called the myth of Prometheus, right? And so this is a quote unquote myth that where, this human god type thing, this Titan, is able to give humans, steal fire from gods and give them to humans. And humans are able then to have, a society because of this technology, which is fire, right? This rudimentary. Right. And Prometheus is hurt for this. He's punished by the gods for this. So there is this myth, and this myth doesn't go away. This myth is something that we see with the Corso narrative. We see it again with Tyler, right? And so I guess what I'm trying to say here is that what makes this myth something that really takes hold and becomes something more like a religion, when a religion is something that's actually believed in, is that there's a kernel of something that could possibly be true. And so that's what I'm trying to say, is that there is possibly habitable planets. We have NASA coming on, every month on, the national news saying we will find these planets, we will find life out there. They're not talking about little green men type thing. And so and a lot of people have had experiences. And so when you work with something that is, you can't objectively identify it and say, this is it, this is the smoking gun.
Right.
But there's the potential truth to it. You're dealing with religion. You're dealing with something that will become religious, because that's what faith is about. So faith is, you can't pin it down. Like you and I, we say, oh, we believe that there's something, but we don't know what it is.
Yes.
And so, here we have it all over the UFO narrative, all over the UFO discourse. And I'm not saying that it's not real. I mean, the experiences are absolutely real. The scientists that I work with here absolutely believe in what they have. They believe in these artifacts because of that. That possible, the fact that we can't identify what these artifacts are, or, and it also, like you said, it does lend itself to psyop material as well, because it can be spun. But Fahrusha, listen, don't you think religions have also been used by governments?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So that's my point. That's my point, is that there's nothing different here. We're seeing the same thing. So when we look, that's why I used Christianity as an example. There were so many different versions of Christianity in the first and second centuries. And then by the time the Roman government got hold of Christianity, it basically squashed a lot of the opposition and created what's called Catholicism, which is literally universal, right?
Right.
And so it was their version of Christianity that was kind of propagated. So I guess that's my point, is that you're going to have this is happening, and it's done by institutions. It's done by people who are narrators. It's done by me.
Yes.
It's done by you. We are all involved in doing it. So we can't escape it. We might as well be self-conscious of it. That's my
it's
point.
good to be conscious of it is I guess, is the point that I am trying to make. And I know that your book isn't about finding out the answer, the absolute answer. But I do think that that is something that other people are going to bring up. And I have no idea if any or part of your experience was a psyop, and I don't expect that I will find the answer to that out. The only thing that I would say is that many of these purported artifacts seem to be of a similar nature. That is, that there is magnesium involved and that there are metals involved in very thin layers, purportedly, that are not being able to be manufactured on Earth. So that is indeed a very, very interesting place to be, and something to muse about and to ponder. And just to go on a little bit involving your book, the second part of the book is like mind-blowing beyond UFOs when you really get to think about it. And that is that over the course of time, and now more than ever, what is true, ostensibly as far as anything can be true, is being diverted or subverted, or it's very malleable. And not only malleable in the sense of different people having different points of view, like what happened at a bank robbery, but other people coming over it and making these kind of docudramas out of what had been a situation that might otherwise be verifiable, let's say from an old-fashioned newspaper account. But even those were probably slanted, and definitely were slanted in one way or another. And without getting into politics of today's United States, which we do not do on this show, but we can certainly see how everybody's screaming fake news about everything on both sides of the aisle and in foreign countries as well. So it becomes extraordinarily disturbing to the human psyche that nothing is true.
Yeah, right. So what you're talking about is the sections in my book. I don't know if you're familiar with Kit Green.
Yes.
So Christopher Green has read the manuscript, and he said, "I'm afraid people are going to ignore the middle of your book and just focus on the kind of, the first two chapters and the last two chapters."
The salacious UFO stuff.
Right, exactly. He said the middle is what is the scary part. And I agree. The middle is the scary part because that's actually my research. And I've done some of that. If you go to my website, American Cosmic, I've done 2 other books that I've collaborated with people who are media scholars on. And basically in those books, we talk about technology and, the environment of technology and how we're immersed in it. There's no going off the grid. We can't go off the grid anymore as much as we'd like to. So we're here, we're in the grid. And when you bring up, the fake news, how do we tell, I talk about Scott Brown's In the Field Facebook group, which is a great Facebook group for people who are videographers. And these are people who want to capture the phenomenon, and a lot of them just do, and they do a really good job. And Scott Brown is the facilitator, and what he does is he wants to keep this distinction between what's factually an unknown object, and what's a drone. Or what's a CGI, computer generated,
yes,
photoshopped. And he's been doing a really good job until recently because now he can't. He says the technology is such that I can't tell the difference anymore. And so here we are in this situation where we can't decipher what's true and what's not true. And so there's and you know what? It's only going to go exponential, Fahrusha. So then what do we do? The question is, what do we do? And by the way, philosophers have a word for this. And they have a whole group of philosophy. You can actually specialize in this. And it's called external world skepticism. When you just don't know, you are like skeptical of everything around you, the whole external world. What if it doesn't exist? What if it's not true? And there's a really great article that addresses this question. And it's by David Chalmers. And it's called...
Yes.
Yeah, it's called The Matrix as Metaphysics. And and everyone should read it. It's actually free online. And I make my undergraduates read it because it describes the world we live in now. And he basically says, okay, you think that your brain is in a vat and that, all the things that you see around you, this is your world, but it's not your world because your brain is actually in a vat. And, you think you're touching this, but you're not, basically the Matrix argument.
Right.
And he says, what if we just assumed that this is reality and that this is the fact, this is the world we live in. We just don't have enough information. Then he actually uses science to go in and say, that's actually reality. It is reality because if you think you're touching this desk, I'm touching a desk right now. If you think you're touching this desk, you're actually not really touching a desk. You're touching these molecules that do this and do that. And if we actually did, a scientific analysis of it, it would be something much different than what you think a desk is. So, he's basically saying that this is our world. So let's just assume it and go from there. And I think that that's right. So I believe that that's probably a good way to think about this. The question is, though, is that there are ethical questions that come up then about it. Because, if you can fake stuff so well that it looks real, and then people perceive it as real, and that's my point in those chapters, because I saw it firsthand when I was involved with the first Conjuring movie. I saw firsthand how they used these techniques to create belief, and it's so scary. And I say, and there were, in fact, I'm going to be on another podcast for Oxford that discusses academics who participate in movies that quote unquote fake reality, and what are the ethical, what's ethical about doing this? And so I think we're in a whole new world and a whole new, we've got to talk about this type of stuff. And so I guess my book is using the UFO, situation as a way, because there are real experiences. I look at Teresa of Avila. She has a real experience, and then it gets completely changed. Ray Hernandez has a completely real experience that then gets completely changed 180 degrees on TV.
Yes.
So, so the question is, is that ethical? I guess is the question. And also, what does that do to the person's experience? How does it change their own experience of their experience?
And you also, in your book, vis-a-vis Ray, who has been a guest on Shattered Reality podcast here, a very nice guest, you show like a recreation of what his wife saw versus what he saw.
Yes.
And there were, they couldn't be two individuals more more unified than the two of them, long-term couple and all.
Yeah.
They're in the same room and they see something anomalous, but they see different things.
Yes, I thought that was just great. I love that. So, and they also interpret it differently. She's a Catholic, and she interprets her experiences as angelic. And he keeps kind of like this mind. He doesn't know. He says he thinks it's ET intelligence, but he doesn't. He just doesn't know beyond that. So Ray is a very honest guy. He's an honest researcher.
Yes, I like Ray. I think that he's a good person, and I think that he has the best intentions in mind. It's not for him. He was a successful lawyer. It's not for him only just about, getting some income from going the circuit or anything of that nature. He presents things from a different point of view. And it has been our mission on Shattered Reality Podcast to sort of look at different points of view. We've presented people who were involved with different traditions of belief systems, such as involving with Santa Muerte, for instance, and different kinds of Mexican traditions, Central American traditions, because I think the person's worldview changes on some level what they experience. And so an academic from Canada, an academic white male from Canada, is going to be seeing something different than somebody in the Brazilian Amazon basin in the island of Colares, for instance, where there was a big UFO issue.
That's right. Yes.
And I think that if you're coming from strictly a white American male view of UFOs, you're not really going to get the whole thing, because there's women who see things differently, and there are people of different cultures who come and go out of these US of A who see things differently as well. And part of our point here is to give voice to some of the other points of view without espousing, as I said at the beginning, one particular point of view or religious application, for instance.
Yes, I agree. Definitely. I think that's a good point.
So, getting on to your conclusions in this book, and I think, why don't you take this opportunity to just mention all of your books that are out there that people might want to read, including the Purgatory book and the two other books that you are collaborating on in the current time frame.
Sure. So I have a book about the Doctrine of Purgatory, which is really, I think, it goes beyond purgatory, and it talks about the ways in which people of the European Catholic tradition thought about the reality, the materiality of the afterlife and angels and things like that. So it's really about that. And that's called Heaven Can Wait, Purgatory in Catholic Devotional and Popular Culture. And I also have a book that I collaborated on with Michael Bess. And that book is called The Posthuman, The Future of Homo Sapiens. And in that book, we basically, we have about 30 to 32, I believe, different experts throughout the world who talk about technology and our, basically how cyborg we are, and then I also collaborate on digital media and religion and belief with Simone Natale at Loughborough University, who's a scholar of media, and that's called Believing in Bits. So those are the books, and I also have a lot of articles that have been published, and those are actually, if anybody wants to download those, you could go to academia.edu and download any of those for free if you just put in a password. I believe you just have to kind of sign up for it, but it's a free website for academics, and we share our information there. And so I've written about UFOs and the Catholic tradition. And I've posted my original preface about Jacques Vallée there. So those are the things. And then, of course, American Cosmic. And I have a website, americancosmic.com.
And I think that your collaboration with Dr. Jacques Vallée is a wonderful one, because you guys are kind of on the same plane, because he's very interested in all the technology of the internet. He's a brilliant scientist, apart and away from being a researcher of UFOs. And yet he's able to bring all these things together vis-a-vis technology, UFOs, and folklore of the past. So I think that you and he make a great team together.
He's fascinating. He's one of the more intelligent, probably one of the most intelligent people I've ever met. Brilliant. Writing about this phenomena in the 1960s. He works on the precursor to the internet, which is ARPANET. And he also is an astronomer. He has a PhD from Northwestern University, and he lives in San Francisco. And he's engaged with technology, and he's a researcher. So he's still actively involved in researching the phenomena.
Yeah, he's just an incredible person, and I think you're pretty incredible too.
Thanks.
I kind of like to talk about some of my pet subjects, and that is, how do we define what's alive versus what's conscious? And that's one thing. And the second thing is involving any beings from not this 4D reality that we're in. It's possible that some of the things that you research and I attempt to do a little research of and write about and invite guests on about, it's quite possible that there's more than one thing,
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. I say that all the time, that there's not necessarily one phenomenon. Phenomenon is most likely phenomena.
Yes, because some people may be seeing small grays, and that might be one thing. Other people may be seeing luminous beings, and they might be something different, or else they could be related, or else they could be something entirely different, like the long, thin projectile that came into our solar system from outside the solar system. One of the first things that was Oumuamua.
That's right. I remember that.
And that was something interesting, because even to this day, there are astronomers at Harvard who do not preclude the idea that it was a UFO, in essence, a scout sort of vehicle or probe from another place, because of the strange way that it propelled itself around the sun, which was different from an ordinary comet. And I'm no astrophysicist, so I really can't speak to the exact way that they figured this, but I have read the news reports, if we can trust them. But,
Right.
But they say that it's not beyond the shadow of a doubt that it could be a probe of some alien civilization, and which might have absolutely nothing to do with our culture of UFOs. That could be something just entirely different.
Sure.
So to wrap things up, let's talk a little bit about your final analysis of the situation.
Sure. So are you okay? So basically, what's happening in the last two chapters is we do have Tyler and I going to the Vatican, and I go to the Vatican archive, and I'm looking at the manuscripts for Sister Agreda and also Joseph of Cupertino.
Yes.
And each of these is a saint who's said to have levitated.
Yes.
And in fact, I do have Joseph of Agreda's manuscript here. I had to sign my soul away to the Vatican in order to get it. And I'm trying to translate that. It's about 2 feet tall.
Is this Joseph's or Mary's?
This is Joseph's.
Okay. So you're, of course, in touch with Michael Grosso.
Yeah, well, yes, I do know Michael. Yes,
because he's been on the show a few times, and
yeah,
and
he's written an excellent book on Joseph.
Yeah. So it's quite fascinating indeed. And we see these levitations, which are really unusual situations that many people have attested to. Even in the modern world, there were 2 women who visited a Spanish nunnery. What do you call a nunnery? Convent. It's not a monastery, it's a convent. Okay. So they visited a church within a convent. One of these women, perhaps both of these women, were known to me. One of them has recently passed away. And the 2 of them were watching the nuns going through their devotions. And one of the nuns levitated, and the European woman fainted dead away at that moment. But the woman that I know a little bit better, who unfortunately, as I say, passed away, and is known to Michael Grosso as well, she swears up and down, and was a reliable individual, that this nun had levitated right here in the 20th century. So we have a lot of talk about levitation and testimony about levitation from people within the Catholic tradition, but we also have it with Daniel Douglas Hume.
That's right.
Who was not religious in that manner.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, the reason I have this manuscript is because there are a lot of people who are quite interested in looking at those reports in their original, basically in their original form. And what I found was that there are pages and pages and pages and pages of people who signed their names, sworn, and this is during the Inquisition, signed their names that they saw Joseph levitate. Now, these people don't have to sign their names. And in fact, the church didn't really want him to levitate.
Right.
So, so these people are putting their lives on the line, but swearing by the truth of what they saw. So while we're there, we go to the Space Archive, which is in Castel Gandolfo, which is about an hour and a half to 2 hours up from Rome, in a beautiful little town with a volcanic lake, and a volcano. And there's an archive there that has all the research on space and aerial phenomena. And so as we're there, we're looking through, the original works by Kepler and that kind of thing. And it occurs to me that, because we had just looked at Mary of Agreda's bilocation records, and I thought, where did she bilocated to the place where we had gone?
Yes.
And so I said that to Tyler. I said, do you realize that? And he said, he kind of looked at me oddly. And so we did a little analyses of both places in terms of their latitude and longitude and, a lot of different things, just to get as much information as we possibly could, like physical data. And then, then I went back and I reread what she said about her bilocations. And she also, her first book was actually a cosmography, where she bilocates up she flies up, astral travels is what we call it today.
Yes.
She astral travels up above Earth and she looks down, and the name of her book is The Spinning of the Earth.
Wow.
So it's really interesting. So I mean, there were so many strange synchronicities and coincidences on that trip that, and I think that's part of it here. So I think that by the way, I also want to mention this. If you're interested in a book, I hadn't read this book yet before I wrote American Cosmic. It's called Time Loops by Eric Vargo.
We had him on. I told you I do try to do a pretty good job of picking people to come on who have
you do a good job. Oh yeah,
and interesting things to say. And we had Eric on over the summer. I don't remember. I think maybe in August. And he is a fascinating man with some really fascinating points of view. Absolutely.
Yes. So time loops really helped me understand that the whole idea of synchronicity was tied up in what was happening in the kinds of experiences that I got in my research as I was doing, because he's basically saying that time loops back on itself, and that explains those precognitions that you have. So the synchronicity of being in Mexico and then reading up on Mary of Agreda, and then thinking back, and her saying, her basically talking about this type of travel was uncanny. And so, go ahead. His explaining of it was also uncanny.
Yes, I agree. And I wonder if you have any theories about why this area that sort of spans New Mexico and parts of Arizona to include Dulce, New Mexico, involving the Dulce incident and so forth, and your incident going out with Tyler into the I guess the desert somewhere, and Mary of Agreda, having bilocated there, and Indians and Native Americans, I should say, having seen her years before any Caucasians came to that area. Do you think it's something about the area itself? Is it a portal area? Also mentioning that a number of purported UFO crashes happened there, and we don't have that many UFO crashes in Manhattan, for instance.
Right, exactly. Nor in Wilmington.
So, that being said, I mean, what do you make of that particular area as a hot area or a portal area, or what would you say about it from your point of view?
Yeah. So in order to speculate and conjecture about that, which I have done, I would have to remove myself from my scholar position because, for writing the book, I take on my religious studies position, which basically is agnostic with respect to these kinds of things. But my speculative position, which I'm disassociating that from my university and from my press, but this is just my opinion.
Good, yes.
Yeah. Okay. So my opinion, what we did once we realized that this was odd, we thought we should look into it. So what we did then was we went through various apparitions of the Virgin Mary as well, and Joseph of Cupertino, and we identified where these all happened. We took their latitude and longitudes, and we also took some other information that was physical based on what this person, Tyler, who knows a lot about he launches rockets, so he knows all about where you launch rockets and what kinds of conditions you need to do that, and also the mineral and each of the particular places were rich in certain types of minerals, and so these are all physical data that have significant. They're significant. What do they mean exactly? Okay, I don't know, but I do know that we live like. The researcher named Gary Nolan says we live in a physical universe here. We are physical beings. Yes. So this paranormal phenomena is physical. At the end of the day, it's material, which, by the way, is what my book Heaven Can Wait is about. The afterlife is, we could kind of perceive it as this kind of non-physical place, but people have always talked about it as if it were a physical place. Well, why is that? So we've got this paranormal phenomena happening in this particular place, and this particular place is also ground zero, as I put it in the first chapter of my book, of the UFO mythos, the UFO religion. And so you've got some anomalous physical aspects to it as well that do correlate with things that this pilot knew as well. So, I mean, if people, and throughout history, people purported to astral travel, like Emanuel Swedenborg in the 1700s, astral traveled all over the place in the universe. I went to Mars, I went to Venus, and he's supposed to be one of the smartest people historically.
Yes.
So, there's a connection here. And so I think that, do we believe him? Like, what kinds of experiences is he having? Is it, what you talked about earlier about scientists who have these experiences and then, experience some kind of, technological innovation?
Well,
I don't know, but I do think that there's something here that we need to explore. And the John Mack effect aside, I think it's worth exploring.
I think that what we have to make a clear distinction between is what we mean by do we believe them. Now, some of these individuals, we have had experiencers on here with incredible stories, and it's a matter of do you believe them? Well, I choose people that I believe are trustworthy so that something happened to them, something happened to Swedenborg, something happened to me. I believe myself, I believe them that something happened, but what we can't go forward and say is that we necessarily believe the construction that they put around it.
Yes, I totally agree with you. Absolutely. Making the distinction between their interpretation and then whatever it was that happened.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's not because they're lying. This is just as it has been perceived by them, just like the contactee movement in Southern California. Somebody would say, these people told me they were from Venus. Well, were they lying, or did you misunderstand them? Or are they some kind of energy beings actually from Venus? We do not know that.
Right, exactly. Yes.
I would love to talk at greater length about the whole purgatory part and how it's reflected in different religions and different philosophies. But I don't think we have the time to do that. But the one thing I'd like to touch upon before we conclude, and we would certainly love to have you back on again at some point.
Thank you, Fahrusha.
Yeah, we certainly would. But I would like to perhaps conclude our interview with you talking a little bit about the phenomena in Portugal, the Fatima phenomena with the 3 children and the prophecies, and how different people saw different things, very much like the children who saw the UFO in Zimbabwe. I believe it was Zimbabwe. I sometimes get names confused. But in Africa in the 1990s, there was, and John Mack went down there. The children saw one thing.
Right. Yes, that's right.
And I had the privilege of going and meeting one of those people, as well as the researcher at the MUFON convention in just outside Philadelphia a few months ago. But I was unable to make a good connection where I would have loved to have that young woman who was one of there were actually 2 witnesses to the phenomena that were there, an African woman and a British woman who lived in Africa, I believe at the time, or maybe she was South African, I don't know. But they were the 2 women who had lived through that. What they saw was different from what the adults saw, and some people saw one thing and others saw something else. And it was very much like Fatima in terms of who saw what and how some people saw nothing. And a big orb coming out of the sky, and then seeming to be sitting on it and coming off it, and all kinds of stuff. So let's talk just a little bit about Fatima And was it the Virgin Mary, or was it a UFO? And I know you can't. I can't tell you what it was. Nobody can really say. Or maybe it's all the same thing. Is the Corn Maiden from Mexico the same thing as the Virgin of Guadalupe?
Right.
There are those who will scream and stamp and say it was the Corn Maiden, and others, no, it was our Blessed Mother. So I can't touch those things and don't want to disturb anybody's beliefs. But let's talk a little bit about Fatima.
Yes. So if you're interested in that, and if your listeners are interested as well, I definitely have 2 books there in the bibliography. I wish I could remember the name of the first book. It's researchers from. They're not North American researchers, but they've done an analysis of all the primary sources of Fatima, and that book is excellent on it. And Jacques Vallée also does. He actually wrote the foreword to their book, and he's also done primary source research. And the once you start to look at the things that happened to the 3 kids. That they were very young at the time, and cousins, and Lucy, Jacinto, and Francisco. And so what's happening is that they first see a luminous being on a disc, and they don't know what it is. They assume it's an angel, and it tells them that they're going to see this woman. And so they don't. Then the woman is never named, and so the woman then comes, and the Fatima apparition, the apparitions of the Virgin Mary, they happen. There are many of them. They all have their own histories. Listeners should look at them. They're very interesting. They happen in Lourdes. They happen in Fatima, and they're all very different. But one thing is interesting is that you need to. It's usually a child seeing the Virgin, quote unquote Virgin, but the children never actually say who she is until the adults interact with the children.
Right.
So they don't actually know what they're seeing. And then the Fatima, what's interesting about the Fatima apparitions is that there's a giant sighting, and it's called the Miracle of the Sun. Right. And there's a giant sighting of thousands of people who actually go, and it's in 1917, and it's October 29th, and they go and they, you've got atheists, you've got people there that are professionals, you have journalists, you have everybody there. You've got, of course, people who are devotees, and the sun does a lot of very odd things. It looks like it's going to fall on people. People are afraid. People see things. Some people don't see anything. Okay. And so, this you can see again and again. It also happens with sightings of UFOs. You go and you see, look at what happened to Ray Hernandez, right? So they both see something, but they both see something completely different. So the question is, wow, what is happening here, And I think that there are many, many things that are happening. One of the things that's happening is best explained by a book called Religious Experience Revisited by Ann Taves. And she talks about the interpretive process of when you have this special experience, what happens when you start, you engage in the interpretation of it. And it all depends on what, you also said this in this podcast earlier. You said, well, we have an experience, but depending on where we come from, like a white male from Canada is going to see it different than, I believe that's absolutely true. Here you have people who share a cultural tradition, and they see this, they experience it. And I believe it's not necessarily a sighting, it's more of an experience because, the air changes.
Yes.
Some people are wet, some people are not wet. So, it's absolutely a strange experience. Even the Catholic Church, after looking at it, and by the way, the Catholic Church is quite, they actually don't want to say these kinds of things. They err on the side of being extremely cautious. So if they say something supernatural happened, then there is no explanation here for this situation. Uh-huh. But it resembles, my point in the book is that it not only resembles a classic kind of UFO type experience, but if you go to a movie about, and I use 2001: A Space Odyssey, and you look at that movie, and we all look at that movie and we all experience, we have a similar experience. A lot of the things that take place in the movie had also taken place in the Virgin Mary, experience.
Yes.
So in the Fatima experience. And what I'm trying to explain is that the type of media we have today is so immersive that we can't extract, our brains can't really tell the difference when we're in this. And that's what Donna Haraway was trying to get me to understand when I was looking. She said, when you look at the Virgin Mary and these people are looking at an apparition of the Virgin Mary, what's happening in their brains? And I was like, oh, I don't know. Let me think about that. And she said, when you look at a film, you go into a movie theater and you look at a film, what is happening in your brain? And I thought, well, I didn't know until I met Jacques Vallée. Then I figured it out. It's something really similar.
Well, it's a conundrum for sure. And just to finish up my thoughts about Fatima, I have two thoughts about that I wanted to express. And the first one is something that comes up in your book and very eloquently about there is a church, any church. You study the Catholic Church. It could be, a Buddhist church, a Buddhist faith related situation, or it could be Shinto, or it could be Lutheran, or anything. But there's always the organizational church versus the experiential church, like the Jesuits who might be out there, praying and going into different levels of consciousness, whereas there are clerics that work at the Vatican and they have to keep the thing running, and they don't want to have these strange apparitions occurring because then they have to deal with it, and it's they want to keep the people tithing and
right,
not flying off the rooftops.
Right.
That was one point that I wanted to make in that you had made very eloquently in the book. The other thing is something off the wall, sort of. Whatever happened to the poor woman who remained living, Lucia, who lived until 2005? But was she kept prisoner, kind of, by the Catholic Church during some of those years? I mean, she was kept under wraps, wasn't she?
Well, I mean, the Catholic Church has a tradition of certain nuns that take vows of they speak within their convent, but they don't, I forgot the exact name for it. Of course, I should know, but they don't actually interact with society. Those are sisters.
Right. So, they're out of the worldly world.
Yeah. So she could be cloistered, right? She's like, cloistered, and this is by the way, this is a very long tradition that has gotten a lot more humane, because it used to be that that people were holed up in little tiny spaces, and people would have to bring them food and stuff like that. So these were called anchorites.
Yes.
And this was a tradition within the Catholic Church. So
and the Greek Orthodox as well, I believe they have anchorites.
That's right.
Yes.
Yep, anchorites. That's right. And I mean, this is hardcore, right? This is,
not what I'd want to do with my life. But
no, me either. So it could very well be that she is part of that tradition. Now, I don't know. I know there were conspiracies about shutting her up, and she just happened to be a person who was given information from this experience she had. Everybody wanted to know what it was. Wouldn't that be cool if we could know what it was? But she has passed away, and whatever she said is kept somewhere. I am not privy to it.
Right. My question was, and you don't have the final answer to this, obviously, but I want to put it out there, for our listeners to muse over it a little bit. And that is, was her cloistering voluntary or not? That's the real question that's in my mind about her, because she, as you say, the children never used the term the Virgin Mary was here initially until the adults introduced that. And after this went on, she basically went in and became a nun and was never heard from again. I'd just like to know if it was voluntary. But that's not what your book is about. And your book is wonderful. So let's hear it again. It's American Cosmic, and you have a secondary title and a publisher
Yes.
and a way to get
Sure.
the book. If you want to tell our listeners how they can get the book.
Sure. So it's American Cosmic, and I have a website, americancosmic.com, and it's being published by Oxford University Press, and the release date is January 2nd for Oxford, and I could give you a 30% discount for your listeners if they're interested in buying it at the Oxford University site. It won't work on the Amazon site.
Okay.
And the release date for the Amazon site is February 1st.
Wow.
So I don't know why the difference, but there is that difference there. And it was a pleasure to be on your show, and I had a wonderful conversation.
I really enjoyed this a great deal, and I hope and I trust that this will be a blockbuster book. I can't imagine anybody not wanting to read it, and the bibliography alone is amazing, and is going to. If I had endless time, I would just about read everything on it.
That's great. I read everything on it, and oftentimes twice or three times. So I recommend the bibliography definitely.
And the whole book is fabulous. Thank you so much, Diana Walsh Pasulka.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much.
All righty. Bye now.
Okay. Bye.
So that was.
Thanks.
You're welcome. That was Shattered Reality number 80. Diana was very kind to mention a discount. I do not know how long that discount will last for, whether it will last until this show gets up on YouTube as well as our other outlets for the show. But hopefully everybody who listens to the show will just be very, very anxious to read this book and want to pick it up right away. We do have some plans for the new year. This is probably our last podcast of 2018, and we are missing our co-host, Kate Valentine, and we hope that she is able to come back soon. I know she was very interested in coming today, but again, could not make it. And so for Kate Valentine and our wonderful engineer, Bill, and myself, I want to wish everyone a very happy holiday, whether you celebrate Christmas, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, Tet, or any other holiday that occurs in this time frame. Have a very, very happy holiday. And all of us here in the Western world celebrate New Year. So happy New Year to everybody ahead of time. Thank you. And goodbye from Shattered Reality.